So grief is that sorrow that you feel when there is a loss, a void in your life. And it doesn't have to just be from death. It can be a change of any kind in your life. Losing a job, financial troubles, divorce, mental illness, chronic illness, abuse or neglect, substance abuse, being a caregiver. It really is about a specific loss and then the sorrow that is felt, this emptiness. The first 2 weeks following Sarah's birth were really intense for me spiritually. I was very angry. I was in this grief, but I didn't really recognize or acknowledge it specifically as grief. I felt guilty because I was afraid of my own daughter, and there were many layers of emotions going on. I just took these complicated emotions as they came up. I just kept taking them to prayer. And then at one point, I felt that the Lord spoke to me very clearly and said, look, you can either choose to continue down this path, and then you're going to choose to be a victim. Or you can choose to accept the mysteries in life, to trust me, to take my hand on this journey, and to choose victory through the cross. I just said to the Lord, yes, I choose the cross, I guess. I don't want to do this. I don't want to suffer. Nobody does. He was saying, I'm leading you to something greater. Greater than your pain, greater than your struggle, greater than your questions. My peace I leave you, but not as the world gives it, do I give it to you. Do not let your hearts be troubled or afraid. Peace is a true spiritual grace that is bestowed on the soul that seeks God and knows that He's the only one that can grant that. In order to acquire peace, you have to just learn to hand it over to the Lord in prayer. We have to foster this ongoing spiritual discipline, really, that involves surrendering our sufferings to Jesus. When Sarah had her first surgery, she was 6 months old and she was getting her skull cut open. And I started to pray my rosary. I was washed over in peace. All the thoughts, all of the stress, all of the fears vanished. It was very, very much a spiritual grace that was given to me that day. There are 6 spiritual principles that I mention in my book in terms of how a person can utilize those spiritual principles when suffering, grieving, to get to a place of peace and joy. And the foundation of that would be humility of heart. I talk about what is humility and how does the person get from a place of kind of clinging to the pain and being angry and bitter and trying to control it to letting go. Abandonment to divine providence. This is that conscious, I surrender this to you, Lord. I'm going to offer it to you and unite my suffering to yours. Holy indifference means that you pray for God's will and you really truly are resigned to whatever the outcome happens. So for instance, I take that divorce or that cancer or that financial situation to prayer, but I don't have an expectation of what's going to happen as a result. Thank God ahead of time. You have this confidence. No, God wants what's good for me. He loves me. And so I am going to thank Him for the answer to this prayer ahead of the time. Even if it's not what I want, I'm still going to be grateful and take this leap of faith knowing that God's plans are going to be so much more magnificent than what I could think of. The dark night is basically understanding the difference between holy and unholy darkness. Just because you can't hear His voice, you can't feel Him right now, it doesn't mean He's not there. It doesn't mean He doesn't care about you. It means that He is calling you to a deeper level of your spirituality. The wound of the heart, this is more of a mystical concept. You are mystically handing your wounds to Jesus and you're uniting your wounds to His wounds, and He transforms them back into love. And it's the final principle because you have to go through those other steps in your spiritual walk to get to that place where you are able and ready to say, yes, I understand that suffering can be love. I think the main spiritual fruits for me have been joy and peace. I want people to understand this is hard work. There are no easy answers to the problem of suffering. There's a pruning of the soul that occurs in this process, this spiritual process with the 6 principles. That refinement of the soul is something that maybe that person, him or herself, cannot visibly see or articulate well, but he or she knows that there's some kind of change occurring in the heart.